She heard their plan through the vent, and by midnight, she was gone with her dog. The house was silent, too silent. Evelyn lay awake, her German shepherd stiff at the foot of the bed, ears locked on something she couldn't yet hear. Then the voices came, low and careful, drifting through the vent. Not concern,
Make sure the cameras are
not
offline
love.
by 11.
A plan.
What about the dog?
And in that moment, she realized
He won't be
if
an
she stayed,
issue.
she would lose everything, including herself. What would you have done in her place? Stay and fight, or leave without a word? The first thing Evelyn Harper noticed about the house was how quiet it was. Not the comforting quiet she had known for 40 years in her own home. The kind filled with ticking clocks, soft music, and the familiar rhythm of her husband moving from room to room, but a different kind. This quiet felt polished, controlled, or like something that had been carefully arranged and then sealed in place. The house stood in a neat subdivision in Frisco, Texas, where every lawn was trimmed to the same height and every mailbox stood at the same angle. From the outside, it looked perfect. Large windows, pale stone, a wide driveway that could hold 3 cars. The kind of house people pointed at and said, "They're doing well." Evelyn stood in the entryway that first afternoon, one hand resting lightly on the handle of her suitcase, the other gripping the leash of her German shepherd, Atlas. He stood pressed close against her leg, his amber eyes scanning the space with quiet intensity. "It's beautiful, Mom," Caleb had said, his voice full of something that sounded like pride, or maybe relief. "You'll be comfortable here. Plenty of room." Evelyn had smiled, because that was what mothers did. They smiled so their children wouldn't have to worry. But even then, as she stepped inside, she had the faintest sensation that she was entering a place where everything already had a purpose, and none of it included her. Lydia appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a neatly folded towel. She was dressed in soft, neutral colors, her hair pulled back in a way that looked effortless but precise. "There you are," Lydia said warmly. "You must be exhausted. Let me take your bag." Before Evelyn could answer, the suitcase was already out of her hand. "Your room's upstairs," Lydia continued, turning toward the staircase. "We thought it would give you a little more privacy." Privacy. The word lingered oddly in Evelyn's mind as she followed. Atlas stayed close behind her, but his paws silent against the hardwood floor. The room was clean, immaculate, really. A neatly made bed with crisp white sheets, a dresser with empty drawers, a small vase of artificial flowers placed carefully on the nightstand. It looked less like a bedroom and more like a guest space in a model home, ready for someone, but not meant to hold a life. "We cleared out some things to make space, Lydia said, setting the suitcase down near the closet. "I hope that's all right." Evelyn nodded. "Of course." It wasn't until later, after Caleb had gone back to his office and Lydia disappeared into the kitchen again, that Evelyn began to notice the first small shifts. Her suitcase had been unpacked, not by her. Her clothes were folded neatly in the drawers, arranged by color, while her toiletries were lined up in the bathroom with an order she didn't recognize. Even her books, 3 she had brought from home, were stacked precisely on the nightstand, their spines aligned as if measured. Evelyn stood in the doorway, her hands resting lightly against the frame. "I thought I'd help you get settled," Lydia called from downstairs, her voice carrying easily through the house. Evelyn forced a small smile, though no one was there to see it. "That was very kind," she replied. But something inside her tightened, just slightly. She stepped into the room, reaching out to adjust one of the books. It felt like the only thing she could still move without asking. Atlas moved in beside her, his shoulder brushing against her leg. He didn't lie down. He didn't relax. He simply stood there, watching the hallway. That night, Evelyn tried to follow her usual routine. She liked to read before bed, just a few pages, something familiar. But when she reached for her glasses, they weren't where she remembered placing them. She searched the nightstand, the dresser, her bag. Finally, she found them in the bathroom cabinet, placed carefully beside her toothbrush. A small thing, an easy thing to overlook. Still, she stood there for a moment longer than necessary, her reflection staring back at her in the mirror. I must have put them there myself, she murmured. Atlas shifted behind her, letting out a low breath. Downstairs, she could hear Lydia moving about, opening and closing cabinets with quiet efficiency. The sounds were steady, controlled, like the rest of the house. When Evelyn returned to the bedroom, Atlas followed, stopping just inside the doorway. Now he turned once, then positioned himself between her and the hall before settling down. You don't need to guard me, she said softly. His ears twitched, but he didn't move. The days that followed were smooth on the surface. Breakfast was always ready at the same time. Lydia would set the table with careful precision, placing Evelyn's plate slightly apart from the others, as if accommodating her while still keeping her separate. Caleb came and went, always in a hurry. He kissed her cheek in passing, asked if she needed anything, then disappeared into phone calls and meetings. You'll get used to it, he said once, offering a reassuring smile. It just takes time. Evelyn nodded again. Time. She had lived long enough to know that time didn't always make things better. Sometimes it only made them clearer. One afternoon, she returned from a short walk with Atlas, just around the block, nothing far, and paused at the front door. Inside, she could hear Lydia speaking on the phone. No, it's going fine, Lydia was saying, her tone light but edged with something sharper underneath. Just an adjustment period. Evelyn stood still, her hand hovering over the handle. She forgets little things here and there, Lydia continued. Nothing serious, but you know how it starts. Evelyn felt Atlas press gently against her leg. The words weren't meant for her. That much was clear. After a moment, Evelyn opened the door quietly and stepped inside. Lydia's voice changed instantly. Oh, she's just come in, she said brightly. I'll call you later. The conversation ended with a soft click. There you are, Lydia said, turning with a smile. How was your walk? Nice, Evelyn replied. She removed her shoes slowly, placing them by the door, exactly where Lydia had shown her on the first day. Atlas remained close, his eyes fixed on Lydia for a second longer than necessary. That evening, as Evelyn sat alone in her room, she looked around at the space again. Everything was in place. Everything was clean. Everything was correct. And yet, she couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere along the way, something small but important had been quietly moved out of reach. Atlas lifted his head from the floor, meeting her gaze. For a brief moment, she had the strange sense that he understood. Outside, the neighborhood lights flickered on one by one, identical homes glowing in identical rows. Inside, Evelyn sat very still, listening to the silence. And it felt even quieter than before, and somehow, smaller. The next morning began with the soft clink of porcelain. Evelyn opened her eyes to the faint scent of coffee drifting upstairs. For a moment, she lay still, unsure of where she was. The ceiling above her was unfamiliar, smooth, pale, unmarked by the faint water stain that had once lived above her bed for years. Then it came back to her. Frisco. Caleb's house. Lydia. Atlas lifted his head the instant Evelyn stirred. He didn't stretch the way he usually did in the mornings. He simply rose, alert, watching the door as if expecting it to open at any moment. It's all right, Evelyn whispered, though she wasn't entirely sure it was. Downstairs, Lydia had already set the table. Everything was arranged with quiet precision. Plates centered, napkins folded into neat triangles. Silverware aligned as if measured by ruler. A bowl of cut fruit sat in the middle, the pieces uniform in size. Good morning, Lydia said, smiling as Evelyn entered the kitchen. Good morning. Atlas stayed at Evelyn's side, his presence close enough that she could feel the warmth of him against her leg. I made oatmeal, Lydia continued. It's easier on digestion in the mornings. And I added almond milk, much better for long-term health. Evelyn paused for a moment before sitting. I've always used regular milk, she said gently. Lydia's smile didn't falter. Yes, but this is a healthier adjustment. Small changes can make a big difference over time. Caleb appeared a moment later, already dressed, his phone in one hand. "Smells great," he said, leaning down to kiss Evelyn's cheek before taking his seat. While Evelyn managed a small smile, she lifted the spoon, tasting the oatmeal. It was fine, bland but fine. Atlas remained standing beside her chair. "Atlas," Lydia said, her tone still pleasant, but firmer now. "He shouldn't be in the kitchen during meals." Evelyn looked down at him. "He's always stayed with me." "Well," Lydia replied, setting her own spoon down with careful control, "this house has different rules. It's just about maintaining cleanliness." There was a brief pause. "Come on, boy," Evelyn said softly. Atlas didn't move. He remained where he was, his eyes fixed on Lydia. "Atlas," Evelyn repeated, a little firmer this time. Slowly, reluctantly, he stepped back toward the doorway, but he didn't leave entirely. He settled just outside the kitchen, where he could still see her. Lydia resumed eating. These transitions can be difficult," she said after a moment. "But structure really helps, especially at this stage of life." Evelyn didn't respond. She focused on the slow, steady movement of her spoon. After breakfast, Evelyn went upstairs to retrieve her sweater. The house was cool in a way that didn't match the mild Texas morning outside. When she returned, Lydia was already waiting near the front door. "I adjusted the thermostat," Lydia said. "You don't need it so warm. Overheating can cause fatigue and confusion." Evelyn blinked slightly. "I wasn't aware I was overheating." "It's preventative," Lydia replied smoothly. "We're just trying to stay ahead of things." "We." The word lingered. Later that morning, Evelyn reached for her phone to call an old friend. Margaret. Someone she had known for over 30 years. The number was still saved, though she hadn't dialed it in weeks. She pressed the call button. Nothing happened. She frowned, trying again. Still nothing. Lydia appeared in the doorway, as if she had been waiting. "Oh," she said lightly. "I had the phone plan updated yesterday. There were some unnecessary features on there." Evelyn lowered the phone slowly. "I didn't ask for any changes." "I know," Lydia said, "but it's easier if I manage those things for you. It prevents mistakes." "Mistakes?" Evelyn stared at the phone in her hand. "I'd like to call Margaret," she said. Lydia's smile softened, almost sympathetic. "Of course, just let me know next time and I'll help you place the call." Help. The word felt heavier than it should have. Atlas stepped closer, his body brushing against Evelyn's leg again, and his ears were angled forward, his attention fixed entirely on Lydia. The days began to settle into a pattern. Breakfast at the same time. Meals measured, controlled. The television volume adjusted without asking. Lights turned off in rooms Evelyn had only just entered. Each change was small, each explanation reasonable. And yet, taken together, they formed something else entirely. One afternoon, Evelyn opened the refrigerator, searching for the yogurt she remembered seeing the day before. It was gone. Instead, there were neatly labeled containers, pre-portioned meals with dates written in black marker. "I organized the fridge," Lydia said from behind her. "It's easier to keep track of things that way." "I knew where everything was," Evelyn replied quietly. Lydia stepped closer, her voice lowering just slightly. "Evelyn, no, it's not about what you knew, it's about what's safest moving forward." Evelyn closed the refrigerator door. Atlas moved between them without a sound. Not aggressively, not threatening. Just present. Blocking. Lydia paused, her smile tightening for a fraction of a second before returning. "He's very protective," she said. "Yes," Evelyn replied. "He might need training for boundaries in this house." Evelyn rested her hand gently on Atlas's head. "He understands more than most people think." That evening, Caleb came home later than usual. He looked tired, distracted. His tie loosened as he moved through the kitchen. "How was your day, Mom?" he asked. "It was fine." Lydia stepped in before Evelyn could say more. "We had a good day. I've been helping her stay on schedule." Caleb nodded, already reaching for a glass of water. "Huh? That's good," he said. "Structure helps." Evelyn watched him for a moment. "Caleb," she said, "I tried to make a phone call earlier, but Oh, Lydia mentioned that, he interrupted gently. It's just easier if she handles those things for now. Less to worry about. Less to worry about. Evelyn felt something shift, just slightly, inside her chest. Not sharp, not sudden. Just a quiet movement, like a door closing somewhere deep inside a house. I see, she said. That night, Evelyn sat on the edge of her bed, her hands folded loosely in her lap. The room was exactly as it had been the day before. Nothing out of place, nothing missing. And yet, something felt reduced. Atlas sat in front of her, his gaze steady. You don't like it here, do you? She murmured. His ears twitched. He didn't look away. Down the hall, a floorboard creaked. Evelyn turned her head slightly, listening. Then silence again. The house held its shape, its order, its quiet. But beneath it, something unseen had begun to tighten. The first time Evelyn noticed the email, she thought it was a mistake. It appeared in the corner of her screen late one afternoon, while she sat at the small desk in her room, the one Lydia had cleared for her personal use. The message was brief, formal, something about a recent change to her online banking preferences. Evelyn frowned. She didn't remember making any changes. She adjusted her glasses and clicked the message open, reading it twice. The words didn't become clearer the second time. If anything, they felt more distant, as if they belonged to someone else's life. Atlas lifted his head from the floor, watching her. Did I do this? Evelyn murmured. She tried to log into her account. The password didn't work. She paused, then tried again more slowly, careful with each letter. Still nothing. A small, quiet pressure began to build behind her ribs. She reached for the notebook she kept in her bag, a habit from years in the archives, writing things down to keep them safe. Her passwords were there, neatly printed in her own handwriting. She typed it exactly as written. Incorrect. Evelyn sat back in her chair. That's not possible, she whispered. Atlas rose and came to her side, resting his head lightly against her knee. His presence grounded her just enough to keep her from spiraling too quickly. Footsteps approached in the hallway. Lydia appeared in the doorway, as if summoned by the tension itself. Everything all right? She asked. Evelyn hesitated, then turned the screen slightly. I can't access my bank account. It says my password is wrong. Lydia stepped closer, her expression calm, almost reassuring. Oh, she said, glancing at the screen. I updated your login details earlier. It was part of simplifying your accounts. Evelyn blinked. You updated them? Yes, Lydia replied smoothly. There were too many inconsistencies. It's easier if everything runs through one system. Less confusion that way. Evelyn's fingers tightened slightly on the edge of the desk. I would have liked to know before that was done. Lydia gave a soft, patient smile. Of course, but I didn't want to overwhelm you with details. You've had a lot to adjust to already. There it was again, that careful tone, not unkind, but final. What's the new password? Evelyn asked. Lydia hesitated just long enough to be noticeable. I'll handle anything you need from the account, she said. You don't have to worry about it. Evelyn felt something shift again, that same quiet closing, like a window being sealed shut. I've managed my own accounts for 40 years, she said, her voice still calm. And you've done a wonderful job, Lydia replied. But sometimes, support is the smarter option. Support. Atlas moved closer, pressing against Evelyn's leg, his body now fully between her and Lydia. For a brief moment, Lydia's eyes flicked downward at the dog, then back up. Her smile remained. Well, she said lightly, dinner will be ready in about an hour. She turned and walked away. The room felt different after she left. Heavier. Evelyn stared at the screen for a long moment before slowly closing the laptop. Later that evening, she went looking for a folder she had brought from her old home. It contained important documents, insurance papers, identification copies, things she had always kept close. She was certain she had placed it in the bottom drawer of the dresser. But when she opened it, the folder wasn't there. Instead, she found neatly folded scarves, arranged by color. Evelyn paused, her hand hovering over the fabric. "That's not right," she whispered. She checked the closet. Nothing. She opened her suitcase, though she knew she hadn't left it there. Still nothing. Atlas followed her from one place to another, his movements quiet but attentive, as if he were tracking something invisible. Evelyn stood in the center of the room, just trying to retrace her steps. "I put it here," she said aloud, more firmly now. "I remember." Her voice echoed slightly in the tidy space. Footsteps again. Lydia leaned against the doorway, arms loosely crossed. "Looking for something?" she asked. "My folder," Evelyn replied. "The one with my documents. It was in this drawer." Lydia tilted her head slightly, as if considering. "I moved a few things while organizing," she said. "You had items in several places. It's easier to keep everything centralized." "Where is it?" "I'll find it for you," Lydia said. "No need to stress." Evelyn's gaze held steady. "I'm not stressed. I just want to know where my documents are." Lydia's smile softened, but her eyes didn't. "I understand," she said. "But sometimes things get misplaced. It happens." Misplaced. The word settled heavily in the air. "I didn't misplace it," Evelyn said quietly. There was a pause, just long enough to stretch. Lydia stepped into the room, her voice lowering slightly. "Evelyn," she said, "it's okay if you don't remember every detail. That's part of what we're working through." Working through. Evelyn felt the edges of her certainty begin to blur, not because she believed Lydia, but because the repetition of it made doubt feel possible. Atlas let out a low, steady growl. Not loud, but unmistakable. Lydia stopped mid-step. For a moment, something flickered across her face. Then it was gone. "You see?" she said softly. "He's picking up on your agitation." Evelyn placed her hand gently on Atlas's back. "He's not reacting to me," she said. Lydia's smile returned, thin as paper. "We'll talk about this later," she said, turning toward the door. "Try to get some rest." When she was gone, the silence returned. But it didn't feel empty anymore. It felt crowded. Evelyn sat down slowly on the edge of the bed. Her hands rested in her lap, still, as if waiting for instruction. "I know where I put it," she whispered. Atlas came closer, resting his head against her thigh. She closed her eyes for a moment, steadying herself. Downstairs, she could hear Caleb's voice now, low, distracted, talking about work, about schedules, about things that didn't include her. The house carried on, everything in place, everything controlled. But somewhere within it, small pieces of her life were beginning to move without her permission. And no one, not even her own son, seemed to notice. Or worse, they noticed, and said nothing. Atlas lifted his head again, his ears pricked toward the hallway. Evelyn followed his gaze. The door stood open, the light beyond it steady. But for a brief second, so brief she almost dismissed it, she had the strange, unmistakable feeling that something had just shifted out there, something quiet, something watching. And suddenly, she wasn't sure anymore if the things that didn't add up were accidents or something much more deliberate. The thought followed Evelyn into the next morning like a shadow that refused to stay behind. She woke earlier than usual, before the house had settled into its controlled rhythm. The air felt cooler, quieter. For a brief moment, lying there in the half-light, she could almost pretend she was back in her own home, before everything had been rearranged without her permission. Atlas was already awake. He sat near the foot of the bed, not resting, not relaxed, watching the door. "You didn't sleep much either, did you?" Evelyn murmured. His ears flicked, but he didn't move. Downstairs, the familiar sounds began again. Cabinets opening, water running, the soft, measured pace of Lydia's morning routine. Evelyn dressed slowly, choosing her clothes with care, as if the act itself might anchor her in something that still belonged to her. When she reached the bottom of the stairs, Lydia was already setting the table. "Good morning," Lydia said, smiling as always. "Good morning." Atlas remained just behind Evelyn, his presence steady, unyielding. We have an appointment today," Lydia added casually, as if mentioning the weather. Evelyn paused. "An appointment?" "Yes," Lydia said, placing a glass of water beside the plate. "A checkup, just routine." Evelyn's brow furrowed. "I don't remember scheduling anything." "I took care of it," Lydia replied. "It's easier that way." Evelyn looked toward Caleb, who had just entered the kitchen, adjusting his watch. "Caleb?" she asked. He avoided her eyes for a moment, then offered a quick nod. "It's just a quick evaluation, Mom. Nothing serious. Just making sure everything's on track." On track. The phrase echoed uncomfortably. "I'm not ill," Evelyn said. "No one said you were," Lydia replied gently. "This is preventative. At your age, it's important to stay ahead of things." Evelyn felt that quiet tightening again, at the same invisible pressure that had been building day by day. Atlas stepped forward slightly, positioning himself closer to her leg. "It won't take long," Caleb added, already reaching for his keys. "We'll all go together." All. Evelyn sat down slowly, her appetite gone. The drive was quiet. The clinic stood in a low, beige building just off a busy road, clean, efficient, impersonal. Inside, the waiting room smelled faintly of antiseptic and something floral meant to mask it. Evelyn sat between Caleb and Lydia, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Atlas lay at her feet, his body still but alert, his eyes scanning every movement around them. A nurse called her name. "Evelyn Harper?" Evelyn stood, glancing briefly at Caleb. "You can go in," he said. "We'll be right here." But Lydia was already rising. "I'll come along," she said, "just to help clarify anything." Evelyn hesitated, then nodded. The examination room was small, bright, too bright. The doctor entered a few minutes later, a man in his early 50s with a practiced smile and a tablet in his hand. "Mrs. Harper?" he said, extending his hand. "I'm Dr. Collins." Evelyn shook it lightly. "Let's just go over a few things," he continued, glancing down at the screen. "I understand there have been some recent concerns about memory and daily functioning." Evelyn blinked. "Concerns?" she repeated. Lydia stepped forward slightly. "Just minor things," she said smoothly. "Occasional forgetfulness, some confusion with routines. Nothing dramatic, but we thought it best to have it checked." Evelyn turned her head slowly toward her. "I didn't say I was confused," she said. "Doctor." Collins gave a reassuring nod. "Of course, this is just a precaution." He began asking questions, simple ones at first. "What day is it? Do you know where you are?" Evelyn answered each one clearly. Then the questions shifted. "Have you misplaced items recently?" Evelyn hesitated. Her mind flickered back to the missing folder. "Yes," she said carefully. "But I don't believe I misplaced them." Dr. Collins tapped something into his tablet. "Any difficulty managing finances?" Evelyn's jaw tightened slightly. "I've managed my finances for decades." Lydia spoke gently, her tone soft but firm. "There have been a few inconsistencies lately. That's why we stepped in." Evelyn felt the words land like something heavy and cold. "We?" she asked quietly. The doctor continued, his voice calm, neutral. Have you experienced moments where things felt unclear or out of place?" Evelyn looked at him, then at Lydia, then back at him. "Yes," she said. He nodded, as if confirming something already decided. "Thank you," he said. "That's helpful." The rest of the appointment passed in a blur of quiet observations and measured responses. Blood pressure, reflex checks, a few memory exercises. Through it all, Lydia remained present, calm, helpful, answering when Evelyn paused, clarifying when Evelyn spoke, reframing everything. When it was over, Dr. Collins smiled again. "We'll monitor things moving forward," he said, "just to ensure everything stays manageable." Manageable. Evelyn stood, her movements slower now. Atlas rose immediately beside her, pressing close as they left the room. In the hallway, Evelyn stopped. Oh, she turned to Lydia. "You told him things," she said. Lydia's expression didn't change. "I gave him context," she replied. "That's important for accurate care." Evelyn held her gaze for a long moment, then turned away. The ride home was even quieter than before. Caleb kept his eyes on the road. Lydia looked out the window. Evelyn sat in the back seat, Atlas beside her, his head resting lightly against her arm. The house greeted them the same way it always did. Clean, still, controlled. But something had shifted. That night, Evelyn couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the faint glow of hallway light stretching across the floor. Atlas paced, back and forth, back and forth. His nails clicked softly against the wood, a steady rhythm that refused to settle. "Atlas," she whispered. "Oh, what is it?" He stopped, turned toward the door, and stared. Not at the handle, not at the floor, but just beyond it, as if something stood there, watching. Evelyn slowly pushed herself up, her heart beginning to beat a little faster. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Then, a faint sound. Voices. Low. Muffled. Coming from downstairs. Atlas let out a soft, warning growl. Evelyn stood, her bare feet touching the cool floor. She moved toward the door, each step careful, deliberate. The voices continued. She couldn't make out the words yet, but she could hear the tone. Serious, measured, hidden. Atlas stayed close as she stepped into the hallway. The light from below cast long shadows up the staircase. Evelyn paused at the top, listening. Something was happening. Something she wasn't meant to hear. Oh, and for the first time since arriving in this house, she wasn't just uncertain anymore. She was afraid. Evelyn stood at the top of the stairs, her hand resting lightly against the wall to steady herself. The house below was dim, lit only by the soft glow from the kitchen. The voices drifted upward again. Lydia's voice. Calm. Controlled. Lower than usual. Evelyn took one slow step forward. Atlas moved with her, silent, his body close enough that she could feel the tension running through him. She paused halfway down the stairs, careful to avoid the one step that creaked. She had learned that within days of arriving, what to step on, what to avoid, how to move without being heard. The voices became clearer. "We can't keep doing this indefinitely," Lydia was saying. There was a pause. Caleb responded, his voice quieter. I know, I didn't think it would happen this fast." Evelyn's chest tightened. Happen? What was happening? She reached the bottom of the stairs and stopped just before the hallway that led to the kitchen. The air vent along the wall sat just above the floor, carrying sound more clearly than the open space. Atlas lowered his head, ears forward, a low rumble building in his throat. "Shh," Evelyn whispered. She crouched slowly beside the vent, her breath shallow, her heart pressing hard against her ribs. Lydia's voice came through again. "The evaluation today helped," she said. "Dr. Collins is already noting early cognitive decline. It's enough to begin documenting a pattern." Evelyn's fingers tightened against the floor. Documenting. Caleb exhaled sharply. But that doesn't mean she's—" "It doesn't have to be severe," Lydia interrupted gently. "It just has to be consistent." Silence. Then Caleb again, softer now. "I don't like this." Evelyn closed her eyes briefly. For a moment, just a moment, something inside her leaned toward that hesitation. But Lydia continued. "This isn't about liking it," she said. "It's about being realistic. She can't manage things the way she used to. You've seen it." "I've seen her forget things," Caleb said. "That's not the same as—" "It's the beginning," Lydia replied. "And if we wait too long, we lose control of the situation." Control. The word struck harder than the rest. Evelyn's breath caught. Atlas shifted beside her, his body stiff, his attention fixed forward. Caleb's voice dropped even lower. What exactly are you suggesting? There was a brief pause. Then Lydia spoke again, each word measured. We move forward with guardianship. The world seemed to narrow. Evelyn didn't move, didn't breathe. Legal guardianship, Lydia continued. It's the safest option, for her and for us. For us, Caleb repeated, almost to himself. Yes, Lydia said. It allows us to manage her finances, her medical decisions, everything. We can transition her into a proper facility before things get worse. Facility. The word echoed in Evelyn's mind, hollow and cold. She won't agree to that, Caleb said. She won't have to, Lydia replied. The silence that followed stretched thin. Evelyn felt something inside her begin to unravel, not quickly, not violently, but steadily, like a thread being pulled loose. What do you mean? Caleb asked, as Lydia's voice softened. It means we file for a competency evaluation. With enough documentation, the court will appoint us as her guardians. Evelyn's hand pressed against the floor to keep herself steady. Her guardians, her son, and the woman standing beside him. They'll look at her behavior, Lydia continued. The memory lapses, the financial inconsistencies, the confusion. It all builds a case. That's not... Caleb stopped himself. Not what? Lydia asked gently. It's not fair, he said. Evelyn's eyes opened. She leaned closer to the vent, her heart pounding now. Fair. Lydia let out a soft breath. Caleb, she said, her tone shifting just slightly. She sold her house. She's here because she can't manage on her own anymore. You said that yourself. Evelyn's chest tightened again. She had sold her house. Well, but not for this. She trusted us, Caleb said. And we're honoring that, Lydia replied smoothly, by making sure everything is handled properly. There was another pause, longer this time. Evelyn waited for something, anything that would stop what was unfolding below her. But Caleb didn't speak. Lydia continued. Once guardianship is established, we'll have access to her accounts. We can consolidate everything, cover the cost of care. It's the responsible thing to do. Responsible. Evelyn felt the words sink into her like something heavy. And the house? Caleb asked quietly. The proceeds are already in her accounts, Lydia said. Once we're managing those, it becomes much simpler. Simpler. Evelyn's breath came shallow now. Every word settled into place. Every piece. The rearranged belongings. All the controlled meals. The changed passwords. The doctor's visit. It wasn't confusion. It wasn't concern. It was a plan. A slow, careful plan. Atlas let out a low, unmistakable growl. Evelyn reached for him quickly, her hand pressing gently against his neck. Quiet, she whispered. The voices downstairs paused. Evelyn froze. For a moment, she thought they had heard. But then Lydia spoke again, her tone lighter now. We'll take it one step at a time, she said. There's no need to rush. No need to rush. Evelyn felt something shift inside her. Not fear, not confusion. Something else. Clearer. Colder. Caleb exhaled. I need time to think. You've had time, Lydia replied softly. Now we need to act. Silence followed, then the sound of a chair moving. Footsteps. Evelyn pulled back from the vent, her movements slow and careful. Atlas remained still, his body tense, his eyes fixed on the hallway. Evelyn rose to her feet. The house felt different now. Not smaller, not quiet, but exposed, as if the walls themselves had finally revealed what they were hiding. She turned and moved silently back toward the stairs. Each step upward felt heavier than the last. When she reached her room, she closed the door softly behind her. Atlas followed immediately, positioning himself between her and the hallway once more. Evelyn stood in the center of the room. Her hands trembled slightly, but her mind was suddenly very clear. "They're not helping me," she whispered. Atlas watched her. "They're preparing to take everything." The words settled into the space around her, no longer uncertain, no longer questioned. Known. Evelyn crossed the room slowly and sat on the edge of the bed. For a long moment, she didn't move, didn't think, didn't speak. Then, quietly, she reached for her suitcase and began to plan. The house returned to its quiet rhythm by morning. Breakfast was served at the same time. Lydia moved through the kitchen with practiced ease, placing bowls, adjusting napkins, pouring coffee. Caleb skimmed through emails, his attention divided, his expression unreadable. Nothing had changed. And yet, everything had. Evelyn sat at the table, her hands steady, her movements deliberate. If Lydia noticed anything different, she gave no sign of it. Atlas remained close, as always, but now his stillness carried purpose, not just instinct. "You slept well?" Lydia asked, her tone light. "Yes," Evelyn replied. It wasn't a lie. Oh, she hadn't slept much, but she had rested her mind. And more importantly, she had decided. The next 48 hours unfolded with careful precision. Evelyn said little. She followed routines. She allowed Lydia to manage the meals, the thermostat, the small adjustments that had once unsettled her. But beneath that quiet compliance, something else was taking shape. Every movement became intentional. Every moment, observed. When Lydia stepped out for groceries, Evelyn moved quickly but calmly. She opened the dresser and retrieved what little she still controlled: clothing, her notebook, a small pouch of personal items she had kept hidden in the lining of her suitcase. Atlas watched the door. Always the door. Evelyn moved to the closet next, pulling down a pair of shoes more suited for walking than the soft slippers Lydia preferred she wear. When she finished, she sat for a moment on the edge of the bed, her breath measured. "We won't get a second chance," she whispered. Atlas stepped closer, his presence solid, unwavering. That evening, Evelyn made a quiet request. "I'd like to organize my things," she said to Lydia after dinner, "just to make sure I know where everything is." Lydia smiled. "Of course, that's a good idea." Permission, given easily, because it didn't matter. Not yet. Evelyn spent the evening moving slowly through her room, opening drawers, adjusting items, appearing to sort. But in truth, she was memorizing. What she had, what she didn't, what she could carry, what she would leave behind. By the second day, and her plan had settled into something clear, simple, precise. She would leave at night, when the house was at its deepest quiet, when Lydia's routines became predictable, when Caleb's presence faded into sleep. She would take only what she could carry. No noise, no hesitation, no goodbye. That night came with a stillness that felt almost deliberate, the kind of silence that rests over a house when everything inside believes it is safe. Evelyn sat on the edge of her bed, fully dressed. The suitcase lay open beside her, carefully packed. Clothes, her notebook, a small amount of cash she had hidden away years ago, copies of documents she had managed to gather without drawing attention. Nothing more, nothing unnecessary. Atlas stood by the door, waiting. The clock on the nightstand read 12:11 a.m. Evelyn rose slowly, and her joints protesting in quiet resistance. "Easy," she murmured, more to herself than to him. She took the suitcase in one hand, the leash in the other. The hallway beyond her door was dark. She stepped out, pausing only long enough to listen. Nothing. No movement. No sound. Just the steady hum of the house at rest. They moved together, Evelyn and Atlas, down the hallway, toward the stairs, each step measured, each breath controlled. At the top of the staircase, Evelyn hesitated, not from doubt, but from the weight of what she was leaving behind. Her son, the life she had known, the version of herself that had once believed she was safe here. Atlas shifted beside her, his body angled slightly forward. Ready? Evelyn nodded, almost imperceptibly. They descended. The wooden steps held their silence, while the careful path she had learned guiding her safely downward. At the bottom, the kitchen lay ahead, faint light from the street filtering through the windows. The back door. 6 more steps. 5. 4. Atlas stopped. Suddenly. Firm. Evelyn froze. "What is it?" she whispered. He didn't move. Instead, he turned his head slightly, toward the side of the kitchen, toward a drawer. Evelyn followed his gaze. The drawer beneath the counter. One she hadn't opened since arriving. A strange instinct pulled at her. "We don't have time," she murmured. Atlas didn't budge. His eyes remained fixed, waiting. Evelyn hesitated, then moved. She set the suitcase down quietly and crossed to the drawer, her fingers trembling slightly as she pulled it open. Inside, a single envelope. Aged. Sealed. Her name written across the front in a familiar hand. Evelyn's breath caught. She knew that handwriting. She hadn't seen it in years. "Walter?" she whispered. Her late husband's name lingered in the air like something unfinished. For a moment, everything else fell away. The house, the plan, the fear. All of it. She reached into the drawer and took the envelope, her fingers tracing the edges as if confirming it was real. Why was it here? How had it been placed among Lydia's careful order? Questions rose, but there was no time for answers. Atlas shifted again, urgency returning to his stance. Evelyn slipped the envelope into her coat. Then she turned back, picked up the suitcase, moved toward the door. This time, Atlas followed. The handle turned with a soft click. The night air met her immediately, cool, open, uncontained. Evelyn stepped outside, Atlas beside her. The door closed behind them without a sound. No lights turned on. No voices called out. The house remained still, as if it had already let her go. Evelyn stood on the small patch of concrete just beyond the door, her heart pounding now, not from fear, but from something sharper. Freedom. Fragile, uncertain, but real. "No turning back," she whispered. Atlas looked up at her, and for the first time since she had entered that house, he seemed at ease. They walked, away from the house, away from the plan, away from everything that had been quietly taken from her. The street stretched ahead, empty beneath the dim glow of streetlights. Behind her, the house remained unchanged, perfect, silent, controlled. But Evelyn Harper was no longer inside it. And for the first time in days, she was no longer part of it either. The night felt wider than anything Evelyn had known in years. No walls, no measured footsteps, no quiet voices behind closed doors, just open air and the long stretch of an unfamiliar street. Evelyn adjusted her grip on the suitcase, the handle pressing into her palm with each step. Atlas walked beside her without pulling, without hesitation, as if he understood exactly what they were doing, even if she didn't fully yet. They walked for nearly 20 minutes before Evelyn slowed. The neighborhood had faded behind them, replaced by wider roads, fewer houses, and the distant hum of traffic. She stopped under a streetlight. Her breath came uneven now, not from panic, but from effort. "I didn't think about this part," she admitted softly. Atlas sat beside her, watching. The reality settled in, piece by piece. She had left. She had escaped. But she had nowhere to go. Evelyn looked down the empty road. "We need somewhere safe," she murmured. The word safe felt different now. Not a place, not a house, but something temporary, something borrowed. A passing car slowed as it approached, headlights washing over them briefly before continuing on. Evelyn pulled her coat tighter. The envelope pressed lightly against her side, still unopened. She hadn't forgotten it, but she hadn't allowed herself to look yet. Not until she was somewhere she could stop. They reached the bus stop just after 1 in the morning. A metal bench, a flickering light. A route map faded by years of sun and weather. Evelyn lowered herself slowly onto the bench, her legs aching from the walk. He remained standing for a moment before settling beside her, his body angled outward, watching the road. The silence here was different, not controlled, not deliberate, just empty. Evelyn leaned back, her eyes drifting upward toward the dark sky. "We're really out here," she said quietly. The words felt both unreal and undeniable. A bus arrived 20 minutes later. The doors hissed open. The driver glanced at her briefly, then at Atlas. "He's with you?" the man asked. "Yes," Evelyn said. "He's calm." The driver studied the dog for a moment, then nodded. "Keep him close." Evelyn stepped on, her suitcase bumping lightly against the steps. Inside, the bus was nearly empty. A few scattered passengers, most of them half asleep, heads resting against windows. Evelyn chose a seat near the middle. Atlas lay at her feet. But as the bus pulled away, the city began to move around her. Streetlights passing in steady intervals, buildings shifting from residential to commercial, signs glowing in the distance. Evelyn watched it all without really seeing it. Her mind was elsewhere, behind her, in the house she had left, in the voices she had heard, in the plan that had been laid out so carefully. She closed her eyes, then opened them again. "No," she whispered. "Not anymore." Atlas shifted slightly, his head brushing against her ankle. The bus carried them into the heart of the city. When it stopped again, the driver called out, "Downtown terminal." Evelyn rose slowly. "This is us," she said softly. The terminal was bright. Too bright. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in sharp, unforgiving detail, and rows of plastic seats stretched across the space. A few people slept awkwardly in them, bags clutched close, bodies curled in guarded positions. Evelyn stepped inside, her suitcase rolling behind her. Atlas stayed close, always close. They found a seat near the corner, not hidden, but not exposed either. Evelyn sat down, her body finally still after hours of movement. The exhaustion came quickly. Not just physical, but something deeper. A quiet draining of everything she had held together. Atlas lay down beside her, his body pressing lightly against her leg. For a while, she simply sat, breathing, listening, watching. The world moved around her without pause. A man walked past, talking to himself. A woman cradled a sleeping child in her arms. A security guard glanced in their direction, then looked away, but no one asked questions. No one offered answers. Evelyn reached into her coat. The envelope. She held it in her hands, turning it slowly. Her name stared back at her, written in Walter's careful, familiar script. Her fingers trembled slightly as she broke the seal. Inside, a single folded document, and a letter. She opened the letter first. The paper was aged, but the ink remained clear. "Evelyn, if you're reading this, it means things didn't go the way I hoped they would. I wanted to tell you about this in person, but time has its own plans. There's a place, I put it in your name years ago, quietly, just in case. Somewhere you can go if you ever need to start over. Somewhere no one can take from you. The address is on the document. You may never need it, but if you do, I hope it gives you a way forward. You've always been stronger than you think." Walter. Evelyn lowered the letter slowly. Her vision blurred, just slightly. Walter, even now, still thinking ahead, still protecting her. She unfolded the second paper. A property deed. A small house. Silver Ridge, New Mexico. The name meant nothing to her, but the words beneath it did. Owned by Evelyn Harper. She stared at it for a long moment, then exhaled. "We have somewhere to go," she said quietly. Atlas lifted his head. The exhaustion didn't disappear. The uncertainty didn't vanish. But something shifted. Just enough. Evelyn folded the papers carefully and placed them back into the envelope. She rested her hand on it for a moment longer, then leaned back in the chair. Around her, the terminal remained what it was: cold, busy, indifferent. Oh, the world did not stop for her. It did not wait. It did not care that she was 73 years old, alone, and starting over in the middle of the night. But for the first time since stepping out of that house, Evelyn Harper wasn't standing still. She was moving forward, even if she didn't yet know what waited ahead. The bus terminal clock blinked 6:12 a.m. in dull red numbers when Evelyn opened her eyes again. She hadn't truly slept. Not deeply. Just drifted in and out while Atlas kept his body pressed against her legs, as if anchoring her to the earth. Morning light filtered through the tall glass windows, pale and thin. For the first time since she left the house, the fear felt quieter. In its place was something sharper. Decision. Evelyn rose slowly, joints stiff, and walked to the ticket counter. Atlas followed, was head high, but calm. "1 ticket to Silver Ridge, New Mexico," she said, her voice steady. The young woman behind the counter tapped at her keyboard. "That's a 2-transfer route. You sure?" Evelyn thought of Walter's handwriting, the way he had underlined "somewhere you can go." "Yes," she said, "I'm sure." The ticket cost more than she liked, but not more than staying stuck. They boarded an aging coach bus an hour later. The seats were worn. The air smelled faintly of diesel and stale coffee. Atlas curled at her feet again. As the city faded behind them, Evelyn watched the skyline shrink until it was nothing but a blur in the rear window. She didn't look back again. The first transfer was uneventful. The second left her stranded for 3 hours in a dusty roadside station, where tumbleweeds scraped along the pavement like restless spirits. When by late afternoon, the land began to change. Flat stretches of desert rolled outward in every direction. Rust-colored earth, scattered sagebrush, mountains in the distance like folded paper against the sky. Silver Ridge appeared on the horizon as little more than a cluster of buildings and a water tower leaning slightly to one side. Population 1,142. The bus driver stopped at a single curb with a cracked sign. "Silver Ridge," he called. Evelyn stepped down onto the pavement. The air was dry, warm, and carried the faint scent of dust and something sweet she couldn't name. Atlas stood beside her, ears alert but not tense. "Well," she murmured, "this is it." The town was quiet. A diner with peeling paint, a hardware store, a post office no bigger than a 2-car garage. No one stared. No one pointed. No one knew her. Oh, for the first time in days, that felt like mercy. The address on Walter's deed was written clearly. 1427 Mesa View Road. She asked the woman at the diner counter for directions. The woman studied her for a moment, then smiled faintly. "Out past the ridge. That old place?" Evelyn felt her stomach tighten. "Old place? Been empty for years," the woman said casually. "Didn't think anyone owned it anymore." "I do," Evelyn replied softly. The woman's eyes flickered with mild surprise, but she only nodded and slid a paper napkin across the counter with rough direction drawn in blue ink. Mesa View Road wasn't really a road. It was a narrow stretch of cracked asphalt that eventually gave way to gravel, then dirt. Evelyn walked slowly, suitcase wheels bumping and catching. Atlas stayed close. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the land. When she first saw the house, she stopped walking. It stood alone against the wide desert sky. Small, single story. White paint faded to a soft, chalky gray. The porch sagged slightly in the middle. Windows dusty but intact. It wasn't grand. It wasn't impressive. But it was hers. Evelyn approached cautiously, heart pounding in her ears. The key inside the envelope felt heavier than metal in her palm. She stepped onto the porch. The wood creaked under her weight. Atlas sniffed the air, then wagged his tail once, slow and certain. "You think so?" she asked him. The key slid into the lock without resistance. For one breathless second, she hesitated. Then she turned it. The door opened inward with a low, tired sigh. Dust motes floated in the late afternoon light. The interior smelled closed up but not rotten. Living room straight ahead, kitchen to the left, a hallway leading to what she assumed were bedrooms. The furniture inside was sparse but covered in sheets. Walter had prepared this place. Not abandoned, not forgotten. Waiting. Evelyn stepped inside slowly. Her footsteps echoed softly. Atlas moved ahead, checking corners, sniffing walls, exploring with quiet confidence. The kitchen cabinets were stocked with basic dishes. The water sputtered when she turned the faucet, brown at first, then clear. Electricity flickered on after a few tries at the breaker panel. It wasn't perfect, but it worked. She walked into the smallest bedroom at the end of the hallway. A simple bed, a dresser, a window overlooking miles of open land. No neighbors within shouting distance. There's no locked doors behind which voices whispered about her future. Just sky. Evelyn sat on the edge of the bed and let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding for days. "We made it," she whispered. Atlas jumped onto the mattress beside her and rested his head against her thigh. For a moment, hope swelled in her chest so unexpectedly it almost hurt. She wasn't powerless here. She wasn't watched. She wasn't an inconvenience to anyone. But as the sun slipped below the horizon and the sky deepened into violet, a different thought crept in. Starting over wasn't the same as winning. This house needed work. The roof showed signs of wear. The yard was overgrown with dry weeds. The pantry held only canned goods and rice. And her money, while enough to survive for a while, wasn't endless. Evelyn stood and walked back into the living room. When she removed the sheets from the furniture, coughing lightly as dust rose. "This is not an ending," she said aloud, more to herself than to Atlas. "This is work." Outside, the wind picked up, brushing against the house with a low, steady hum. Not threatening, just present. Evelyn stepped onto the porch again as darkness settled fully over Silver Ridge. The sky above her was enormous, stars already piercing through the fading light. She had left humiliation behind. She had found shelter. But survival was only the first step. Tomorrow, she would walk into town. Tomorrow, she would ask about work. Tomorrow, she would begin again. For now, she stood in front of the small, weathered house on Mesa View Road and allowed herself one simple, radical thought. No one here owned her story. She would write it herself. So the first night in the house was quieter than anything Evelyn had ever known. No traffic, no distant voices, no footsteps in the hall that didn't belong to her. Just the slow creak of wood settling and the steady breathing of Atlas curled at the foot of her bed. She slept. Not perfectly, but deeply enough to wake with something she hadn't felt in a long time. Strength. Morning came softly through the thin curtains, painting the room in pale gold. Evelyn sat up, listening. Nothing. No tension in her chest. No anticipation of conflict. Just stillness. "Well," she whispered, swinging her feet to the floor. "Let's see what we've got." The kitchen greeted her with cold tile and quiet practicality. She opened cabinets, checked supplies, canned beans, rice, a few sealed jars, enough to get by, but not enough to build a life. Atlas watched her as she moved, his eyes following every step, as if measuring the space alongside her. "We'll need more than this," she said. He wagged his tail once. Agreement. After a quick wash and a cup of lukewarm coffee from an old tin, Evelyn stepped outside. The desert morning air was cool, sharp, and clean. Mesa View Road stretched empty in both directions. No cars, no people, just wind brushing lightly over the dry grass. For a moment, doubt flickered. Not loud, just enough. What if she had come too far this time? What if starting over here meant disappearing instead of rebuilding? Atlas stepped ahead, then paused, looking back at her, waiting. Evelyn exhaled slowly. "Right," she said. "We move forward." The walk into town felt longer in daylight. The sun climbed quickly, meant warming the ground beneath her feet. By the time she reached the diner, the same woman from yesterday was wiping down the counter. She looked up. "You made it out to the old place," she said, not unkindly. Evelyn nodded. I did. The woman studied her a second longer, then poured coffee into a chipped mug and set it in front of her. On the house, she said. First day in town. Evelyn hesitated, then accepted it with a small, grateful nod. I'm Evelyn. Ruth, the woman replied. Silence settled between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It felt neutral. Evelyn took a sip of the coffee. Hot, strong, real. I'm looking for work, she said finally. Ruth leaned against the counter. What kind of work? Evelyn paused. It had been so long since anyone had asked her that question, like it mattered. I can cook, she said slowly. Clean, keep things running. I've done a little of everything. Ruth nodded once. I might need help here, she said. Part-time, nothing fancy, pays not much. It doesn't have to be, Evelyn said quickly. Ruth's eyes softened just a fraction. Come back tomorrow morning, she said. We'll see how you do. Relief hit Evelyn so suddenly, it almost made her dizzy. Thank you, she said. Ruth waved it off like it was nothing. But it wasn't nothing. It was the first step. Evelyn left the diner with a steadier stride. The hardware store came next. A bell rang as she pushed the door open. Inside, a man in his 60s looked up from behind the counter. You lost? He asked, not unfriendly. No, Evelyn said. Just new. He nodded. That's worse. She almost smiled. I'm looking for basic supplies, she said. Tools, cleaning things, maybe some materials for repairs. He glanced at her hands, then at the dust on her shoes. You bought that place out on Mesa View? Yes. He let out a low whistle. That house has been waiting a long time, he said. For what? Evelyn asked. The man shrugged. For someone stubborn enough not to walk away. Evelyn held his gaze. I'm not walking away. Something in her tone must have reached him. He nodded once, more serious now. Name's Carl, he said. I'll give you a fair price. And if you need advice, you ask. Thank you, Evelyn replied. She left the store with a small bag of supplies and something more valuable than tools. Recognition. By the time she began the walk back home, the sun was high and unforgiving. Sweat gathered at her temples, but her steps slowed. Halfway down the dirt road, the doubt returned. Stronger this time. The house needed more than cleaning. It needed repairs, time, money, energy she wasn't sure she had. What if this is too much? She murmured. Atlas stopped walking. He turned, standing squarely in her path. His eyes met hers, steady, unmoving, as if refusing to let her finish that thought. Evelyn stared at him for a long moment. Then she let out a breath that turned into a quiet laugh. All right, she said. I hear you. They continued, step by step. When the house came into view again, it looked different. Not smaller, not more broken. Just real. No illusions left. No fantasy to hide behind. This was the truth of her new life. Work. Evelyn set her bag down on the porch and rolled up her sleeves. This dust filled the air as she swept the floors. Cobwebs clung stubbornly to corners. The windows needed scrubbing. The porch needed reinforcement. The hours passed without her noticing. One task led to another. Movement replaced doubt. Purpose replaced fear. By late afternoon, the living room looked different. Cleaner, lighter, like it had taken its first breath in years. Evelyn stepped back, hands on her hips. It's a start, she said. Atlas barked once, sharp and approving. She smiled, a real one this time. But as she moved toward the hallway, something caught her attention. A sound. Faint. Almost nothing. A soft, hollow shift beneath the floor. Evelyn froze. The house fell silent again. Too silent. She took one slow step forward. Another. The floor creaked under her weight. But this sound had been different, or deeper. Hidden. Atlas moved ahead of her now, his body tense. He stopped near the center of the living room. Then he lowered his head and pawed once at the floorboards. Evelyn's breath caught. "Atlas!" He pawed again. More insistent. The same spot. A chill slid down her spine. Not fear. Something else. Recognition. She crouched slowly, placing her hand against the wood. For a moment, nothing. Then, a faint echo, hollow beneath. Evelyn sat back, her heart beginning to race. This house wasn't just worn. It wasn't just forgotten. It was hiding something. And whatever it was, Atlas had found it first. Evelyn remained crouched on the floor, her palm pressed flat against the wood. The house was quiet again, but now the silence felt different, like it was waiting. Atlas pawed once more, sharper this time, and his nails scraping lightly against the worn boards. "All right," Evelyn said softly. "All right, I see it." She stood slowly and crossed to the small supply bag she had brought from town. Inside, she found the flathead screwdriver Carl had insisted she take. "You'll need something like this sooner than you think," he had said. She hadn't known how right he would be. Back at the spot, she knelt again and ran her fingers along the seam between the boards. One section felt slightly raised, just enough to notice if you were looking for it, or if something else was. Atlas sat beside her now, watching closely. Evelyn wedged the screwdriver into the narrow gap. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a faint shift. The board lifted just enough for her to get her fingers underneath. Her breath slowed. Careful. Slow. Now the wood came up with a dry, reluctant creak. Beneath it, darkness. A small compartment, no wider than a suitcase hidden between the floor supports. Evelyn leaned closer. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, were several objects. Bundles, boxes, paper. Her heart began to pound. Not with fear, but something closer to anticipation. "What were you hiding?" she whispered. Atlas leaned forward, sniffing but not touching. Evelyn reached in and carefully lifted the first bundle. It was heavier than it looked. She set it on the floor and unwrapped it slowly. Inside, journals, leather-bound, worn at the edges, handwritten, several of them. She picked one up, opening it carefully. The pages were filled with neat, deliberate handwriting. Dates, observations, descriptions of plants, remedies, processes. Evelyn's brow furrowed as she flipped through the pages. "This isn't just notes," she murmured. "This is a system." She set the journal aside and reached back into the compartment. A small wooden box. Inside, dried herbs, labeled and sealed. Another bundle. More papers. Some brittle with age. Drawings of plants. Instructions. Formulas. Evelyn sat back slowly, the weight of what she was seeing beginning to settle. This wasn't random. It wasn't forgotten clutter. Someone had built something here. Someone who knew this land. Who had lived here. Worked here. Survived here. Atlas nudged one of the journals gently with his nose. "You knew, didn't you?" Evelyn said. He looked at her, calm and certain. Evelyn picked up another journal and turned to the first page. A name. Clara Vance. Clara. Oh, the writing beneath it steady and unhurried. "If you're reading this, then you've found what I left behind. That means you're either curious or you need this as much as I once did." Evelyn's fingers tightened slightly on the edge of the page. She kept reading. Clara's words weren't dramatic. They weren't meant to impress. They were practical. Clear. Rooted in experience. Lists of plants native to the region. What they could be used for. How to prepare them. How to survive in a place where resources were limited, but knowledge mattered. Evelyn looked up slowly, her gaze drifting across the room. The house, the land, the distance from everything she had known. This wasn't just a place to hide. It had been a place to live. To build something quietly, without interference, without control. Atlas shifted beside her, and then moved toward the kitchen. Evelyn followed. He stopped near the back door, looking out toward the yard. The land stretched unevenly behind the house, patches of dry soil, clusters of wild plants she hadn't noticed before. She stepped outside. The sun was lower now, casting long shadows across the ground. Atlas trotted ahead, stopping near a cluster of plants growing close to the edge of the yard. He pawed lightly at the soil. Evelyn approached slowly. The plants were small, unremarkable at first glance, but now she saw them differently. She turned back inside, grabbed the journal, and flipped through the pages until she found a similar sketch. There, the same leaf shape, the same pattern. Yarrow, she read quietly, for healing. Evelyn looked out at the land again. Not empty, not useless, alive, only full of things she didn't yet understand, but could. Her heart beat faster, not from fear this time, but from something rising. Possibility. She returned inside, gathering the journals carefully. Each one felt like a piece of something larger, something left behind on purpose, not hidden to be forgotten, hidden to be found. She sat at the small kitchen table, the journals spread out before her. Atlas lay nearby, finally relaxed. No tension, no warning, just presence. Evelyn opened another journal. More notes, more knowledge, more pieces of a life that had been built here quietly, deliberately. I spent my whole life preserving other people's stories, she murmured, and I almost forgot how to live my own. The words settled into the room, not as a realization forced into place, but as something uncovered, or like the compartment beneath the floor, something that had always been there, waiting. Outside, the wind moved gently across the land. Inside, Evelyn Harper sat surrounded by the past of someone else, and the beginning of something that might finally belong to her. Atlas lifted his head briefly, watching her, then rested it back down. For the first time since she had arrived in Silver Ridge, he wasn't guarding her. He was simply with her, and for the first time in a long while. That was enough. The days in Silver Ridge began to take shape. Not quickly, not easily, but steadily. Evelyn rose before sunrise most mornings, the desert sky still cool and gray. She moved through the house with quiet purpose. Coffee first, then the journals, then the slow rhythm of work that filled the hours without overwhelming them. Well, she learned the land in pieces. What grew where, what thrived in the shade, what survived the heat. Atlas was always nearby, but no longer restless. He moved with a calm certainty now, as if he had accepted this place as theirs. At the diner, Ruth kept her word. Evelyn worked mornings, washing dishes, preparing simple meals, learning the pace of the kitchen. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't easy on her hands. But it was honest, and it was hers. People began to recognize her, not by name at first, but by presence. The older woman with the steady eyes, the German shepherd who sat quietly just outside the door, the one who listened more than she spoke. Back at the house, the journals became something more than curiosity. They became instruction. Evelyn began small, drying herbs, testing simple preparations. He following Clara Vance's notes carefully. Mistakes happened, measurements off, timing wrong. But she adjusted, refined, learned. One afternoon, a woman from town stopped by the diner with a persistent cough. Ruth nodded toward Evelyn. She might have something for that. Evelyn hesitated, then remembered the journal, the mixture. Simple. She prepared it that evening, hands steady despite the doubt. The woman returned 2 days later. It helped, she said simply. That was enough. Word spread slowly after that, not as something grand, but as something useful, real. Evelyn began to earn a little more. Not much, but enough to feel the shift, from surviving to building. Weeks turned into months. The house changed, the porch repaired, the floors cleaned and secured, the yard slowly cleared, revealing the land beneath the neglect. It wasn't perfect, but it was alive. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the sky burned orange across the horizon, Evelyn stood on the porch with Atlas beside her. "This is ours," she said quietly. Not a question, a statement. Atlas leaned lightly against her leg. For the first time, the past felt distant. Not gone, but no longer pressing in. Until a car appeared on the road, far off at first, just a shape against the dust. Evelyn didn't think much of it. People passed through sometimes. Deliveries, travelers. But the car didn't pass. It slowed, then turned toward her house. Atlas stiffened instantly. His body shifted in front of her, his ears forward, eyes locked on the approaching vehicle. Evelyn's breath caught. The car came to a stop just beyond the porch. The engine cut. Silence. The door opened, and Caleb stepped out. For a moment, neither of them moved. The distance between them felt larger than the land itself. He looked different, thinner, tired. His posture carried something heavy, something he hadn't been able to put down. "Mom," he said. The word hung in the air. Evelyn didn't respond immediately. Atlas remained between them, unmoving, watching, waiting. Caleb took a step forward. Atlas growled, low, warning. "It's okay," Caleb said softly, though his voice carried uncertainty. Evelyn placed a hand on Atlas's back. He didn't move. Not yet. "How did you find me?" she asked. Caleb exhaled slowly. "It took time," he said. "Records, old contacts. I had to follow what little I could." Evelyn nodded once. "You shouldn't have come." "I had to," he said. Well, there was something in his voice now. Not control, not dismissal. Something else. "I didn't understand," he continued. "Not then." Evelyn's gaze remained steady. "And now?" she asked. Caleb looked down briefly, then back up. "Now I do." Silence stretched between them. The wind moved lightly across the land. Dust shifted at their feet. "Lydia," he started, then stopped. Evelyn waited. "She went too far," he said finally. "What she was planning, I didn't see it clearly at first. I told myself it was necessary, that it was helping you." Evelyn said nothing. "But it wasn't," he added. "It was control, and I let it happen." Atlas shifted slightly, his stance still firm. "What changed?" Evelyn asked. Caleb let out a breath. "I started asking questions," he said, "about the accounts, about the legal steps, and about what it would actually mean for you. And it didn't sit right anymore," he said. "None of it did." Evelyn studied him. "You stayed," she said. "I did," he admitted. "And now?" Caleb's voice dropped. "We're not together anymore." The words landed quietly. No drama, no emphasis, just truth. Evelyn absorbed it. Not with satisfaction, not with relief, just acknowledgement. "And you came here," she said. "I came to find you," he replied, "to make sure you were safe." Evelyn glanced around. The house, the land, Atlas. "I am," she said. Caleb followed her gaze. "I can see that." Another pause. Longer this time. "I'm not here to take you back," he said carefully. "I know that's not possible." Evelyn's eyes remained on him. "I made choices," he continued. "Bad ones. And I don't expect you to forget that." Atlas's posture shifted slightly. Not relaxed, but no longer as rigid. Caleb hesitated. "I wanted to tell you that I'm sorry." The words hung there, unadorned, unprotected. Evelyn felt them, but she didn't move toward them. Not yet. "You should be," she said. Caleb nodded. "I am." Silence again. Then, "I have my life here," Evelyn said. "I know. I make my own decisions. I know. You don't speak for me anymore." I wouldn't try, he said. Atlas stepped back half a pace. Not fully, but enough. Evelyn noticed. You can visit, she said after a moment. Caleb looked up, surprised. On my terms, she added. Of course. No control, she said. None. No decisions made for me. Never again. Evelyn held his gaze, measuring, not forgiving, not forgetting, but choosing. Atlas moved to her side, no longer blocking the space between them. The air shifted, not healed, but changed. Caleb let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for a long time. Thank you, he said. Evelyn didn't respond. She turned slightly, looking back at the house, at what she had built, at what she had reclaimed. When she looked back at him, her voice was steady. This is my home now. Caleb nodded. I can see that. The sun dipped lower behind them, casting long shadows across the land. For the first time since he arrived, no one was trying to control the outcome. Not him, not her, not anyone. And for the first time in a long time, Evelyn stood exactly where she had chosen to be. The sun slipped behind the ridge, leaving the sky brushed in fading gold and soft violet, while Caleb remained where he stood for a moment longer, as if unsure whether to move closer or step back. Evelyn didn't guide him. She didn't soften the distance. She let it exist. That's all I needed to say, Caleb said quietly. Evelyn nodded once. For a long time, she had imagined this moment differently. Anger, accusation, something sharp and unresolved. But standing there now, she felt none of that. What remained was clearer than emotion. It was boundary. You can come into town tomorrow, she said. There's a diner. Ruth runs it. Caleb looked surprised again. I'd like that, he said. You'll meet people, Evelyn continued. You'll see how I live now. He nodded slowly. I want to understand, he said. Evelyn held his gaze for a moment longer. Then she turned, not away from him, but toward her house. He followed immediately, his steps light, his posture calm. No hesitation, no warning. Just presence. Inside, the air carried the familiar scent of herbs and warm wood. The small kitchen table held open journals, dried bundles neatly arranged, the quiet evidence of work that had become part of her daily life. Evelyn moved through the space without thinking, lighting the lamp, straightening a stack of pages, checking the kettle. Simple things, normal things, things no one had instructed her to do. From the window, she saw Caleb still standing outside, not pushing, not demanding, just waiting. That too was different. She poured a cup of tea and sat down. Atlas settled at her feet, resting his head against her ankle. The house felt full, not with people, but with meaning, with choice. The following morning arrived clean and bright. Evelyn rose early, as she always did, moving through her routine with steady confidence. When she stepped outside, the air was crisp, the land stretching wide and open before her. Caleb's car was still there. He was sitting on the porch now, hands clasped loosely, watching the horizon. He stood when he saw her. Morning, he said. Morning. They walked into town together, not side by side, but not apart either. A measured distance, one that neither of them rushed to close. At the diner, Ruth looked up as they entered. She took in Caleb with one glance, then returned her eyes to Evelyn. Friend of yours? She asked. My son, Evelyn said. Ruth nodded once. Coffee? She asked. Yes, Evelyn replied. Caleb sat quietly, observing the rhythm of the place, with the ease with which people moved around Evelyn, the way they greeted her, the way she responded, not as someone being managed, but as someone who belonged. You've built something here, he said finally. Evelyn didn't look at him. I've built a life, she said. There was a difference. Caleb seemed to understand that. He nodded. I see that now. Later they walked back to the house, the sun higher now, the land brighter. Atlas moved ahead, then circled back, keeping them both within his quiet watch. At the porch, Caleb stopped. "I won't stay long," he said. Evelyn nodded. "That's fine." He hesitated, then reached into his jacket and pulled out a small envelope. "I brought these, he said. "Some of your old photos. Things I thought you might want." Evelyn took the envelope slowly. Inside, images from another life. Her old home. Walter. Moments she hadn't realized she missed until they were in her hands again. "Thank you," she said. Caleb nodded. He didn't ask for anything in return. He didn't reach for more than what she offered, and that mattered. When he finally left, the car disappearing down the long road, Evelyn stood on the porch and watched until it was gone. Atlas sat beside her, still, calm. The land stretched out around them, unchanged, but something inside her had settled. Not completely, not permanently, but enough. Evelyn turned and walked back inside. The journals waited. The work waited. The life she had chosen waited. She moved through the house with quiet purpose, her steps steady, her mind clear. She was not the woman who had arrived here, not the one who had sat at a controlled table, now questioning her own memory, not the one who had listened through a vent, realizing everything was being taken from her piece by piece. That woman had walked out at midnight, and she had not come back. Evelyn set the envelope of photos on the table and opened one of the journals. Atlas lay down beside her. No tension, no watchfulness, just presence. Outside, the wind moved gently across the desert. Inside, the house held its quiet. And for the first time in a long while, Evelyn Harper didn't feel like she was holding on to something slipping away.
She felt like she was standing inside something she had built, something that couldn't be taken, because it wasn't given to her. It was chosen. Sometimes she realized the greatest danger isn't losing everything all at once. It's losing yourself slowly, one decision at a time, until there's nothing left that truly belongs to you. And sometimes the only way to protect that remains is to walk away before it's taken. Evelyn launched the journal gently. Outside, the light stretched across the land, steady and certain. And inside, she finally felt the same. Some homes are given to us, and some we have to claim for ourselves. One hard choice at a time. Evelyn didn't just find a place to live, she found the strength to live on her own terms again. If you were in her place, would you have stayed and fought or walk away like she did? If the story stayed with you, consider subscribing. There are more journeys like this waiting to be told.